Welcome to Partners in Peace. My name is Alaric Hutchinson.
And I'm Andrew Hutchinson.
And today we are going to be talking about transmutation and the 5 harms and how we can utilize these 2 wisdoms taught in Dunisha to help us cultivate greater mindfulness, peace, and healing during these uncertain times with the coronavirus. Before we begin, we'd like to shout out to all of our members out there on the interwebs. We're sad that we're not able to meet physically, but we're of course grateful that we're still able to connect digitally. And for those of you joining us for the first time today, we always like to start any of our classes, any of our Sunday sermons with the Living Peace Code. So you're welcome to follow along or recite it back mentally or out loud, even if you're alone, feel free to. But this is just a great way to anchor ourselves into the present moment. So I will go ahead and read it, and Andrew, if you don't mind being the reciter.
Sure.
Taking a deep breath in. Peace.
Peace.
People embracing a conscious evolution.
People embracing a conscious evolution.
I am the master of my life.
I am the master of my life.
I master my thoughts.
I master my thoughts.
I master my impulses.
I master my impulses.
I master my emotions.
I master my emotions.
I see through illusion.
I see through illusion.
There is no ignorance.
There is no ignorance.
There is no chaos.
There is no chaos.
There is no duality.
There is no duality.
I forever seek and cultivate.
I forever seek and cultivate
Understanding.
understanding,
Harmony.
harmony,
And transcendence.
and transcendence.
Everything is impermanent.
Everything is impermanent.
Change is the only constant.
Change is the only constant.
I release my attachments to the mundane world.
I release my attachments to the mundane world.
I release my attachments to what I know.
I release my attachments to what I know.
I release my attachments to who I am.
I release my attachments to who I am.
I relinquish
I relinquish
myself.
myself.
I am peace.
I am peace.
People embodying a conscious evolution.
People embodying a conscious evolution.
Deep breath. And what do we often like to point out?
That at the start of the code, we talk about embracing these tenets, and at the end of the code, we talk about embodying the tenets.
Fantastic, thank you. And the Living Peace Code is based off of my book, Living Peace, and it's pretty much the foundation that everything that we teach in our client sessions and our community, and it goes through the 3 masteries, the 3 illusions, and then the 3 releasements. And I was practicing releasing there while we were reciting it because in the middle of us, our dog Snow Angel laid down, and every now and then she gives a big grunt, and so a little bit of extra focus there. She's right here. So without further ado, let's take another deep breath and jump right into today's sermon. So Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about what our topic is today?
Sure. So we're going to be talking about something called transmutation as well as the 5 harms. And what I really enjoy about Alaric's teachings a lot is that a lot of them are based in physics, science, things that can be seen in nature around us. And so something I had never heard before in terms of anything spiritual, metaphysical, is that we all know the concept of energy. Energy is out there. All the energy that exists is all that there ever will be. But you can't just cancel energy out. Once energy is created, it's in motion, it's in a physical way, it's going to keep going no matter what. And so a lot of times when we go down this kind of work, we often hear about, well, just cancel out negative feelings or feelings of division. But that doesn't tend to work, because once energy is bubbling up within us, it just can't be erased. And so what you talk about is the idea of transmutation, which is take the energy you're feeling and funnel it in a direction that's healthy. Mm-hmm. And so during this time, a lot of us are feeling anxious, frightened, or even frustrated, angry. And it's not that those feelings are bad or wrong, but instead of saying to ourselves, oh, I don't want to feel that, let me just cut that out. Instead, we can go, oh, that's interesting. I sense that I'm frustrated. I sense that I'm scared. What can I do with that energy? How can I transmute that energy into something beneficial? And how can I not take it out on the people around me? Mm-hmm. And then that leads into the 5 harms, which is one of my favorite set of classes you ever taught. Because again, in this line of work, we often are talking about what people have done to us in the past, or what we're doing to ourselves in our own heads. But often we don't talk about what we're doing to other people. And it's not that what other people have done to us or what we're doing to ourselves isn't important or worth recognizing, but it is also crucial to understand that we do take things out on other people, maybe more often than we think. And so there are 5 harms you go into where we talk about how we could be hurting other people, knowingly or not knowingly.
Mhm.
And especially right now, again, with those feelings bubbling up within us all during this quarantine time period and uncertainty, we just want to be aware of not taking it out on people around us, whether people we know or don't know. So combining that with how do we change the energy within us into something more positive or at least unifying or helpful for other people. So
Yeah, let's breathe that in. Thank you for sharing all that and beautifully put. And before I jump into the Dunisha teachings, I thought it would be wonderful to share one of Thich Nhat Hanh's 5 teachings of mindfulness, the 5 mindfulness teachings. And this is number 4, which is loving speech and deep listening. I'm just going to read an excerpt from it. But these 5 principles are what his monks at Plum Village and all over the world practice to help cultivate that mindfulness and to cease causing harms. And they, although they don't use the word transmutation, they're definitely transmuting the energies within so they can cultivate more compassion without. And so, just going to read a couple sentences here. And the first one is, knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I am committed to speaking truthfully using words that inspire confidence, joy, and hope. When anger is manifesting in me, I am determined not to speak. I will practice mindful breathing and walking in order to recognize and to look deeply into my anger. I know that the roots of anger can be found in my wrong perceptions and lack of understanding of the suffering in myself and in the other person. And although, again, a little bit different in teachings here because we don't ever say wrong perceptions, but Thich Nhat Hanh's not using it in a way that's judgmental. It's more of a meaning of saying misaligned perceptions. But let me read that last sentence one more time because it really is quite profound. I know that the roots of anger can be found in my misaligned perceptions and lack of understanding of the suffering in myself and in another person. And so really anytime that we're spilling our pain onto other people, a lot of the times it has to do with our lack of understanding and our inability to channel our own. And so in Dunisha, we make it a point to have a daily practice of transmuting, a daily practice of meditation, and a daily practice of discoveration, which those other words I'll be going more into in my next book, Living Earth. But for today, understanding transmutation is making sure that we're taking time out every single morning with a little bit of silence and stillness so that we can really tune into what are we feeling today? You know, what are the thoughts that are most prominent? What emotions are rising? What mental stressors are weighing on me or that I'm anticipating for the day ahead? Normally we're just rolling from one moment into the next moment or one day into the next day, and we're not taking this time to stop and be still so that we can then recognize maybe the prickly pear that we are. A great practice that I've learned further years back, was to always disclaim to the people around me how I'm feeling. If I'm feeling a bit foggy, if I'm feeling a bit prickly, if I'm feeling a bit XYZ, it doesn't matter what it is, I always do my best to say, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm feeling today, it has nothing to do about you, and if I seem a bit off, this is why. And I've noticed that a lot of people don't do that. And so who can attest that you felt some funky energy from someone before and then you take it personally or then they spill it onto you and you don't know what to do with it. And all of a sudden their problem becomes both of your problems or a new problem arises out of this inability to effectively communicate. And so by practicing stillness and transmutation in the morning, what we're doing is we're learning to first recognize what energy is present and then learning to transmute it into healthier ways. And so, for example, the transmutation exercise would be to disclaim, you know, this is what's going on within me right here, right now. And by even just acknowledging it, it actually helps dissipate it slightly. Just that simple acknowledgement helps with dissipation. And then one more sentence from Thich Nhat Hanh, and it's kind of a vow. It's, I will speak and listen in a way that can help myself and the other person to transform suffering and see the way out of difficult situations. I will speak and listen in a way that can help myself and the other person to transform suffering and see the way out of difficult situations. And that's what's so interesting, is that because many of us keep things bottled up when we're not speaking, we're not expressing, it's so hard for us to be there for each other. When we're not acknowledging, then literally nothing can change. It can get worse. But non-acknowledgement is not the pathway to healing. Who's watched shows where there's always that character, or maybe they're all doing it in a show where they're just like, I can do it myself. It never works out. And so it's about learning to cultivate this vulnerability and this ability to express. It's one of the best ways and effective tools we have for transmutation. So let's go ahead and discuss the 5 harms, and we're just going to give a brief overview. Again, I'm going to be writing these much more in depth in my future book, but for today we can at least do a gentle touch on each of them. And the first one is ill intent. Literal, deliberate, intentional harm that we inflict on ourselves or inflict on other people. And this even arises out of our reactions, where we generally want to hurt another person with our words or actions because they hurt us. Or maybe maybe it's more of a mental thing where we're judging, because that's still ill intent. Number 2 is the spilling effect, or the spilling of our pain. Anytime that we're in emotional turmoil or caught up in our mental neuroses, it's very easy to accidentally spill our pain onto other people. And I think possibly more than any of these other harms, this one occurs the most, because how many of us are experts at taking care of this? We might be experts in caring for other people, but many people struggle with taking care of our own emotional wounding. And when we don't, it's so easy to spill that pain onto the people around us, especially our loved ones. The third one is aloofness. When we might be so caught up in our own reality that we are not aware of our closed offness or the way in which we're distancing from the people around us. And that can also cause a lot of harm just by being unaware. And again, it's not intentional, but it's just a form of great unawareness due to the lack of our checking into the energies of other people. The fourth one is well-intentioned. How often have we thought we known what is best for another person, and we have made all these assumptions, and we go out of our way to help someone, and it just causes further pain, and maybe even pushes the people away that we're trying to help. What is that saying? The way to hell is paved with good intentions. And there is some truth into that, because when we are not taking the time to deeply ask questions and ask how we can help another person, and instead jumping to conclusions on what we think is best for the other people, oftentimes we are putting our hands into other people's energies and other people's lives in a way that they are not preferring. And it can actually lead to a lot of harm. And the final harm is inherent harm. The nature of this life is an impermanence, and in impermanence comes pain, comes hurt. And sometimes hurt arises, and it's really, it could not have been avoided one way or another. And with this understanding is that it's important for us to cultivate acceptance, because when we're not accepting and when we're in the opposite of resistance, with resistance, we actually transform that pain into the lingering form, which is suffering. And so with inherent pain, it's just going to naturally occur, and we can either be in acceptance of it, or we could be in resistance of it, which only causes further pain, which turns into suffering. So let's breathe all that in. So Andrew, are there any thoughts you'd like to share on this?
Absolutely. So I mentioned this in the last video, but I used to be a U.S. history teacher at the middle school level, and I had to teach a lot in history about times of great trial, whether it be war, whether it be other illnesses going around the world, famine, economic hardships, all of that. And what I kept seeing was that there were times that people took those moments in history and they used that as a scapegoat for their pain. So they said, well, this must be happening because of this person's fault or this group of people's fault. And they took all of their anger and being upset at the world and they took it out on other people in a very negative way. And then I also saw examples where people rallied together and said, this horrible thing has happened, but let's not take it out on other people. Let's come together as either a community, a nation, what have you, and let's help each other. And so I think it's important to keep in mind with the spread of the coronavirus, it's easy to feel the negative emotions rising within us and say, well, it's this person's fault, or I'm angry, I can't go outside, or I'm seeing all of these things that I don't prefer, I don't agree with. And we just either go on social media and type stuff and lash out, or we close ourselves off from the people that we are quarantined with, or we don't check in on our friends, anything. And yet we can also take those feelings right now and say, you know what? I'm going to breathe. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to call a friend I haven't heard from a while and ask how they're doing. I'm going to donate $5 to a local business or a food bank. I'm going to help make masks for my family for when we go outside. I am going to donate whatever I have to a hospital. And we can see how we can take those feelings, transmute them, and look at, well, instead of how I might harm people around me or myself, how can I instead go out and see really the unification of all of us and how we're all in this together. And instead of suffering and elongating this process, even after quarantine has ended, we can at least either lessen that suffering or stop it altogether by deciding each and every day to respond from a place of peace.
Thank you for sharing that. And what I find interesting about action is that movement begets movement. Energy begets energy. And so a lot of times if we're feeling stagnant, it perpetuates feelings of stagnancy. Or when we're in a fog, I've noticed for me in the past, back when I suffered with depression years ago, anytime I'd feel the cloud coming in, I would just wallow in it. I would just give in to it. And I recognize now that even to this day, that sometimes these little clouds like to pop up, but I notice that when I add energy to it, when I add movement to it, when I add action to it, it does dissipate much more quickly than if I say, okay, well, I'm just going to take this whole day to veg out and then I'll feel better because I've already been so exhausted. And so although we're big advocates of rest, that's very important. It's recognizing the ways in which we are resting. It's recognizing the ways in which we are helping. It's recognizing the ways in which we're communicating. What I find interesting about taking some wisdom from Buddhism is that even in the ways that we're being an activist or advocating for other people or helping or showing up in the world, we must make sure that we're doing it from a place of peace. Because here's an interesting thought for y'all to digest, and we'll try and wrap this up with this insight. When we're sitting on our mat, figuratively or literally, when we're in our own stillness and we're cultivating that peace within, sometimes that stillness is doing less harm than if we are out in the world and doing, quote, good things, but amidst all the good things that we're doing, we're causing little fires with our actions, with our addictions, with our words, with our judgments. Because how many of us have either been this way ourselves, or we know people that are like this, to where they're so giving, but at the same time, there is shame involved, there's guilt involved, there's anger, and there's frustration, and there's judgment towards other people who are not doing the same thing or not believing the same way. So what's fascinating is that it's not only a matter of just being mindful of how we're helping, it's how we're helping.
Mm-hmm.
How are we really cultivating that peace in the ways in which that we're showing up to help other people, not just focusing on, well, I'm helping, so that's better than nothing. In Buddhism, it's definitely a matter of how are we showing up in the approach of how are we helping. A lot of hows in that. But does that make sense? I think that is so critical to understand, and being mindful of these 5 harms, and that just because we're, quote, doing good things, or again, full of well intention, because well intention is the 4th harm, are we making sure that we are not aloof? Are we making sure that we're not spilling? Are we making sure that we're not deliberately judging and casting harm with our words? And so all of these things come together and really help us transmute these feelings that arise within us that are often frustrated. And I can attest that sometimes my frustration, especially in the past, came from well-intended things that I was doing. You know, I wanted so badly to help other people. I wanted so badly to help the world that it actually would get me so worked up when I saw other people actively doing the opposite. Mm-hmm. And again, if there's anger bubbling up within me, it's super beneficial for me to make sure that I'm taking care of that in equal measure to how I'm showing up in the world and being of service. Any concluding thoughts?
Yeah, so it seems like from what we've discussed, it's all a great fine line. So it's the idea that rest when you need to rest, but sometimes noticing that we've been resting a long time, especially in quarantine, we can get lethargic, we can get down. And so understanding that even if I just get up to do the dishes or clean one area of my house, as you were talking about, energy begets energy, something to get us rolling. And as we start getting ourselves rolling and transmuting that energy, just being conscious then of when we want to start going out and helping others or transmuting our energy into action, understanding where that's coming from. Are we doing it from a place of obligation? Are we doing it from a place of I need to or I have to? Or are we saying, you know what, I'm actually in a calm place, I'm actually in a peaceful place, and I genuinely want to help those without spilling onto others. Mm-hmm. And just even a little bit at a time can go a long way.
That's beautiful. Let's breathe that in. So on that note, we thank you all so much for joining us for today's video. And as always, links are down below if anyone has a little bit extra that they can give. It's definitely been interesting us not having our physical meetings, and again, with that, our church is not receiving its usual in-person contributions. Mm-hmm. So for those of you who are at home, and if you do have a little bit extra to give, we do have 2 ways in which you can, either through PayPal or reoccurring through Patreon. And again, there's absolutely no pressure involved, but if that's something that you feel inspired to do, it definitely helps us in what we're cultivating here at the sanctuary. Mm-hmm. And we'll definitely be certain to see you all next week for another video. And if anyone ever has any questions or comments, definitely feel free to reach out to us either in a comment section or private message or email, and we'd be happy to tie in some future topics of what matters to you and what you would like us to explore more. So until next time, blessed be.